All right, we're burning daylight. Thank you everybody for joining us. Here we are talking cardboard and we are at Con of the North. This is...
Look at that.
This will probably be the first and only time we're recording in front of a live studio audience. Gotta make sure I don't mess anything up because we get one take. If you don't know, I'm Jurch. I'm kind of the host around here. The man to my left is Cory. He's the one that was the founder of Talking Cardboard. And the man to my right, Nick, is the one that got us here to Con of the North. So give it up for these two gentlemen. Now I'm gonna step out of the way and I want Nick, first of all, to introduce kind of what we're doing at Con of the North, and I'll throw it over to Cory for what we've got going on here specifically. So Nick, take it away.
So first of all, welcome to those that this is the first time they've been at the Con of the North, and also welcome to those that have been here before. I've attended the con as a attendee the last couple years. Really enjoyed this con, and being from Minnesota, appreciated that this is, from my perspective, the largest board game convention in the state, and so of course I want to attend it. This year I figured maybe it was a good time for our Talking Cardboard group to try to run some events. So we worked with the staff and volunteers of the con to set up this room. So I do want to give a shout out to the staff of the con and volunteers to help get the space ready for us, and it's exactly what we were hoping for. And with that said, we're hosting events all throughout the con. Jurch has been doing some SoulForge events over there. Cory's been hosting a variety of games, and I'm also hosting some games, and then we're doing, of course, this event now, a live show. One other thing I want to quick point out is, you're probably wondering, we also worked with publishing companies ahead of this convention. So Jurch specifically has been working with Stoneblade Entertainment for the SoulForge Fusion content over there. And then I've reached out to both Genius Games, who's the publishing company for these STEM-themed educational games in front of you on the table, and then Chip Theory Games should be here tomorrow too for one of my events. So a special shout out to all those publishing companies as well. With that said, did I answer the question?
Absolutely. That was flawless. All right, now Cory,
Yes.
What are we doing here with this episode?
Yeah, so with this episode, like Nick said, this is our first time here at Con of the North. We're kind of doing it live here, so if there's any mistakes, we apologize ahead of time. Just doing it live and seeing what happens. So for this first video here, we are doing our top 5 favorite games we'd like to introduce to new gamers. Not necessarily gateway games or any newbie games or anything like that. Just games that we would love to just get to the table and introduce. It could be lighter games, it could be middleweight games. I don't really know what's on your guys' list or anything like that, but it's just our top 5 favorite games that we're excited to show to new gamers. So with that, I think we should fire it off.
Yeah, okay. Well, my first one's gonna be pretty easy, and it is SoulForge Fusion. It's from Richard Garfield, Justin Gary. It's an offshoot of Magic the Gathering for people that didn't like all of the net decking and the money investment in Magic the Gathering. It's a lane-based combat game where it's 2 players or potentially up to 4 players, teams of 2. You are fusing together 2 algorithmically generated half decks, and then you shuffle up the level ones, and then you're playing against each other. As you play a card, it levels up to become a stronger version of that card. And then you go attacking each other's life points, attacking the opposing creatures, until one person is reduced to 0. I love this game so much, I even started a podcast on it. My brother-in-law Cody and I, we do a weekly podcast on SoulForge Fusion. We go to all the different conventions, and I love sharing this game with other people. So that's my first game I love introducing to non-gamers or new gamers, or anybody that's looking for a different kind of flavor of gaming. Nick, what's your first game on the list?
So I consider myself kind of the main war gamer of the group in Talking Cardboard.
Just a little bit.
With a capital W.
And I would say this is kind of why, but wargaming is kind of a niche within the board gaming hobby, so that's part of the reason why this is only my number 5. But if I was talking to maybe a group of wargamers, I'd put it higher. But for my number 5 game, which I have here with me, is...
He's always got the show and tell.
Well, yeah,
Wait, I didn't know we were going from 5 to 1. I thought it was 1 to 5. SoulForge Fusion is my number 1.
Is that what you just said?
Yeah, multiple times.
No, I'm going 5 to 1.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. Cut it. We'll redo it. Start again.
But it's Memoir 44. Now I am running a big Memoir 44 event here at the con, and this is a great gateway game into the wargaming hobby. One thing that I also I would say cemented this as a game that I feel is great for beginning audiences. I played it with my wife, who's actually here in the back with our dog, and she actually took to this game quite well and actually enjoyed playing it. So I was like, well, maybe this game is actually for a broader audience than I thought. So definitely, if you've never played this game, check it out. Even if you're not necessarily a huge war gamer. But from a war gamer perspective, what I like about it is that there's so many expansion content now for this game, and those expansions add a lot of rules and a lot of flavor and color to the base core game to make it more interesting than for us war gamers that really like a lot of detail. And you can, cater the complexity of this game how you wish, whether you're playing it with a beginning audience or a more advanced audience. And so Memoir 44 is my number 5 game.
And it plays in a fairly quick time frame too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Compared to most war games. So
Correct.
yeah, definitely nice on that. All right, get that out of the way. All right, so my number 5, my go-to for new gamers is typically cooperative style games. I do love cooperative games. I don't necessarily get them to the table a ton, but anytime I bring new gamers to the table, I definitely love my cooperative games. My first game on the list here, number 5, is Horrified. Horrified, it's got 2 versions of it. I've played the American Monsters version as well as the original version. I guess the original version a lot more than the American Monsters now, but both versions are pretty much the same, just with different monsters to take down. Very, very simple mechanisms, but you can tailor the difficulty, which I really love for new gamers as well. So if you've got somebody who's brand new to gaming, doesn't know a whole lot about gaming, you can definitely just try to take down 1 or 2 monsters, and then you can kind of ramp it up to 3 or 4 monsters to create more difficulty once everybody grasps the game itself. So really love Horrified, like the theme a lot. It comes out around Halloween every year, and everybody has a blast with it. You're pretty much just going around the map trying to collect different items, and each monster has an asymmetric win condition to them that you're basically getting different color items for different different goals for each monster. So I definitely love the variability with the monsters and with the different missions that you can mix in.
Yep.
And no game feels the same. So that's my number 5, Horrified.
And with that one in particular, once you're done, you always have some sort of experience on, we were able to defeat the mummy by rearranging the scarabs, and or we couldn't figure it out because John kept taking too many turns that he didn't have the actions for.
Right.
That game's always one where as a group you have good stories from it. My second game on my list is also kind of a more social game. It's Sushi Go Party. I love card games in general, so you're going to see that theme from my list. And Sushi Go Party is great for non-gamers because all the rules to the cards are printed on the bottom. You're all dealt a hand of cards, and it's set collection. You're drawing 1 card from your hand, you're passing the rest to the next person, and then you're revealing to try to collect sets of cards to maximize your points. It's pretty fast, the artwork is super cutesy, and it's really great to get non-gamers in, but people that kind of like math or set collection, it really tailors to them. People who are competitive, they like playing that too because you can start to play off other people. It's very versatile. I love Sushi Go Party. Nick, what's next for you?
So next for me is
Also in Santa's sack?
yes, in my secret stash here, and that's the deck builder game Star Realms. Now,
buddy.
this is a couple of the packs that I have. They have a core pack for this game, and then they've also released a bunch of different expansions. Now, a couple reasons why I like Star Realms as a game for new gamers is, first of all, it's a relatively easy to learn deck builder compared to the other deck builders that exist. Some might say, Dominion maybe is another deck builder that you could start people with, but Star Realms I think is even a little more approachable than even Dominion, and it plays very quickly. A game usually only takes 10-20 minutes. It's the type of game that you can easily play and then have another round, and you're just shuffling a single deck of cards essentially, so it's quick to the table. What I've also really appreciated about this game is the fact they've also introduced kind of ways to play cooperatively. They have boss monster.
Yes, very versatile game.
Yeah, so you can play it cooperatively, and this is another game that my wife has really taken a liking to too. So, and she's not a big gamer, so again, that I use her as an example as a game that can appeal to a wider audience. And
Well, and the app for the game too.
Yep.
The app on the phone.
You can play it, yeah.
That's a great app.
So
Yep.
the app is a great way to really immerse yourself further into this game experience. But also, it's a great gateway into the deck building mechanic,
Yeah.
which so many games nowadays utilize. So and from that perspective, if someone's like, hey, I really want to get into gaming, well, introduce a game like this to them and say, this is a deck building game. If you like this mechanic, there's so many other opportunities to play other deck builders.
Definitely.
Well, and I think, Cory, you introduced me to deck builders through Star Realms.
as well. Yeah.
Yep, that was kind of the gateway there. And that's always fun to know what is a gateway for leading you into other stuff. I know when I was at my most recent Soulforge Fusion event, we pulled out Star Realms as kind of a nice like palette cleanser too. So it was just fun to have something to change things up. The theme, it's themey, it's thematic, that there's a lot of strategy involved, but it's not too much where if you don't like the space theme, it's going to turn you off from that game.
And there's a fantasy theme too with Hero
Yes.
Realms. If, essentially the same game, just a different theme. So whichever theme you like, pretty much essentially the same game. So definitely a lot of variability.
Yeah, what's
On to
next
me?
on your list? Yep.
All right, number 4, moving on. Number 4 is actually a game that I hosted last night here at Con of the North. It is another cooperative game, nice light cooperative game called Paleo, and it's got more of the Stone Age theme to it, which is kind of not a whole lot of games out there with the Stone Age theme, so it's kind of nice to see. But a very, very simple game at its core also. So common theme here with my list are games that have, kind of a nice theme, but definitely simple mechanisms to understand, but also games that you can master and more difficult strategies behind it that you can kind of grow with. And in Paleo, you're given one deck of cards. Each card has different missions or goals on the card that you are collectively trying to beat as a group. Each person selects which location they would like to go to based on the back of each of the cards. It'll show like a picture of a forest or a river or a mountain or these different locations. And just like back in the Stone Age, when you go out and gather something or you're going out and kind of seeking to see what you find, you don't know what you're going to stumble upon. So, you could play it safe, go into the forest, maybe try to gather some wood for the day, but you might stumble across like a wolf or something in the forest that you do need to take down. What's really unique and cool about Paleo that I really appreciate is that on most of the cards, it's got a helping hand symbol on the bottom of it that your teammates can choose to forego their mission card to use the helping hands to help you complete your goals. So if you do stumble across the wolves in the forest, for example, your teammates can then forfeit their cards, their mission, to use their symbols, their strength or their spears or anything else that they have to then help you complete taking down the wolves, for example. It's very difficult. If any of your crew members die, you take a skull. It only takes 5 skulls to lose the game. But the whole point of the game is that you are going out, trying to experience things and create these cave paintings. And if you get 5 pieces to the cave painting, you win. So it's really about just diving in, seeing what you find, and really collectively as a group deciding what ideas you're learning, what new dreams you're coming up with, and just different ways to get these items or these different symbols to help one another out. And it really does feel like you're back in the Stone Age trying to tackle all the issues that I can imagine would have had to tackle back then. So very cool how the theme is integrated in that one.
Well, and like you said, you did that last night, and you were bringing new people in, and they seem to get it all pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So it's got a low barrier of entry. People are able to learn it and kind of immerse themselves in it real quick. My next one is Cursed Court, and this was a game we actually played at your birthday, and we introduced some new gamers to this. Cursed Court is a kind of hidden information game where you are betting on what cards are going to be revealed, and you score more points based on the complexity of the bet. So you have if you've ever played roulette at a casino and you can bet on, number 5 or number 6 or it being black or it being an odd number, is you can do that with Cursed Court in terms of either betting that an individual character will show up or a row or a column, diagonal, 4 corners, all that stuff. This game is great for non-gamers because the theme doesn't matter at all. The idea is you've got hidden information between each person, and then you've got some common information, and you're trying to make the strongest plays possible to hold down your individual bets until all the cards are revealed, and then you see what scores. And you play 3 rounds, so the game can go pretty quick. Or if you're playing with Nick's parents, it'll go a long time.
Yeah.
But it's a fun game. Once people learn how to do this, and I know I play this with my family too. With my parents, my mom loves this game because she likes messing with all of her kids. So she's putting like her crowns in certain spots, and then other people are upbidding, and she's like, "I got you, a psych!" Because it was a bet she didn't want to make. So it's a fun game for non-gamers, for family, people who are competitive, And I know that at least 2 of our families have gotten it to the table. I don't know if you ventured to do that with your family, Cory.
Not yet, but I did bring it today.
Excellent. So we might be able to do that in some downtime and make a few friends and make a lot of enemies playing Cursed Cory. Nick, what's next for you?
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, as Jurch mentioned, it's a great game that I was actually able to get my family into, which is saying something. So,
A non-war game.
Next for me is kind of a menagerie of. I didn't pick one specifically, but it's kind of a trick-taking genre game. So one I have here is called Tournament at Camelot. But there's definitely a lot of other trick-taking games like Niet that we've played.
That's a good one.
And another one that Bottle Imp is another unique trick-taking game, and there's plenty of other trick-taking games. The reason why I like trick-taking as a gateway game is more for the older audience that's not typically has not typically played a lot of hobby games. So for my coworkers, just for the very first time at work, I said, "Hey guys, you want to get together and play a trick-taking game?" I assume they kind of have familiarity playing trick-taking games from growing up, and sure enough, that was the case. I'm like, "Hey, let's play this one called Niet," and they're like, "Okay, sure," and they all understood the basic concepts of how a trick-taking game is supposed to work, whether they played euchre or hearts or whatever, 500, those types of historic trick-taking games. So that's why I have it as a great a great game for a more older aged audience, but also for just a younger audience that doesn't want to maybe play a very complex game. Like Niet is still a very relatively simple game to learn, even if you don't have familiarity with trick taking. And there's another trick taking game that maybe someone will mention in this show that I will let them
that you should be mentioning right now.
No.
But anyway, point being my number 3. Oh,
that's why I put it later on.
It's not on my list.
Oh, it's not.
It's on yours, so you'll mention it.
It's not on either of your
No,
lists?
it's not.
Oh,
Which one?
the one that we haven't talked about, the main one we haven't talked
You can
about.
mention it.
Yep.
Sure, I'll mention it. So the other one that I actually probably like the most is called The Crew, which maybe someone else will mention as well. But why I like The Crew more than any other trick-taking game is because it's a cooperative trick-taking game.
Yeah.
You know, that's a great benefit for getting gamers into playing board games, because a lot of people, like myself, are kind of sore losers, and that, I don't like to lose, and I get competitive. But when you're playing a cooperative game, you don't leave with a sour taste in your mouth, whether you win or lose as a group. So what's great about The Crew is that you have the trick-taking mechanic that a lot of people may already be familiar with, but then it's also a cooperative game, so no one feels like at the end that I wasn't going to win because you already knew how to play, that sort of thing. And that's a big, I can imagine something that's very off-putting to a new gamer is playing a game and feeling that they just lost, they got destroyed because the other people they were playing with were really good. So The Crew also is a very important trick-taking game for me.
Yeah.
Well, and games like The Crew, the retail cost is like $15, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these games are very inexpensive, not a lot of moving parts that you can just get it to the table pretty quickly. And then it's not a sunk cost. It's not like a $50, $60 game. It's super cost effective.
And portable. Very portable. Like this, I don't have the Crew is even smaller than...
It's like this size.
Yeah. So the Crew is later on my list. I'm just going to echo all the things that you say. But I wanted you to talk about it with the verve that you normally have. So I wanted to give you the space for that. That one's a little bit later on my list. We don't need to go back to it. Cory, what's next on your list?
Yeah, so back to common mechanisms that I like to introduce to new gamers is deck building, which Nick talked about with Star Realms, which is not on my list. And Dominion is not on my list either, but also another great one. I like to introduce Clank.
Yep.
Clank, any iteration of Clank is just fantastic. The whole thing with deck building itself is great and all, but when you add a board and you add some spatial elements to it, it really adds a whole nother layer that is very interesting. Especially in today's gaming hobby world, you need to add a little bit of layers, I think, to grab people's attention. I think most people, here, obviously, most people at home have heard of Clank. Clank in Space. The new Clank Catacombs is very interesting because it's got some board building to it, some tile placement. You're actually building out the map and exploring the catacombs as you're playing. But it's really cool because you are building a specific deck with movement points and swords to get through the catacombs, and also fitting your deck with what is it called, experience or influence points to buy additional cards to add to your deck. And what's really neat about deck building, specifically with any deck building game, is that your deck feels unique from any other person's deck. and you're trying to basically formulate your plan different than the other players to try to best your opponents. With the moving around the board, especially in Clank, the main goal is to grab large items that are worth a lot of victory points and get the heck out before the whole cave collapses on you. So that's a lot of fun too. It can be a race, it can be a push your luck. It's also got, like I said, in Catacombs, the tile placement, the deck building. It's got many, many layers, but also it is simple enough to teach within 5-10 minutes. Simple enough for anybody to understand, and I don't think I've ever had a bad game of Clank. I think everybody we've shown it to has had a great time, and you can pick any version. I think Clank in Space is probably the most complicated, complex version, so I would maybe not start with Clank in Space, but the original Clank or Clank Catacombs, I think Clank Catacombs is going to be our go-to version from here on out, especially, you know, at least for us. So that is my pick, Clank.
Okay, I had something too.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. We played Clank Catacombs recently. Definitely echo Cory's comments on how great a game that is. And going back just to Star Realms, that's just like the deck building mechanic, whereas Clank adds even more flavor to it. So what's nice about these kind of more simplified deck building games is they can introduce you, get a player primed to playing a more complicated game that uses that mechanic. Because a game that comes to mind is Undaunted, which is more of a war game. I mentioned that earlier.
Of course it's a war game.
So just kind of thinking ahead, like when you're trying to introduce gamers to a game, like think, okay, if I play this with them, maybe in the future this will help me get you know, if you have a game you really want people to play, well, think about, okay, if that game's a little too complex to get them to play right away, think of a game that could be a good primer for that game that you want them to play.
Just prime them a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
which you've been doing to us for years. So, The Crew was also on my list for one of my top 5, so we don't need to revisit it. Clank just barely missed my list.
Okay.
So we've got a little overlap for some of those. So Nick, you're number 2, are we at?
Yes.
All right, take it away.
So number 2 for me is another kind of generic topic in that, or general topic of game, and that's social deduction game. Social deduction games like Resistance, the other Coup, and those Secret Hitler, and Bang the Dice game. Wait, with me today, I have my copy. I have my copy of Secret Hitler. These games, you know, usually require hardly any rule explanation, maybe 5 minutes of rule explanation. It might take maybe this one's a little more on the complex scale. But relatively speaking, there's not a lot of, there's like hardly any setup, there's hardly any rules explanation. Generally a small footprint. Like this one's probably one of the largest footprint games for social deduction. And great for larger groups of people too. So if you have like 10 people that have never really gotten into the hobby and you're like, oh, I want to introduce them to board games, well, then a social deduction game might be perfect. Or One Night Ultimate Werewolf, or Ultimate Werewolf's, I guess, another classic social deduction.
There's a million of them.
So I can't really pick one out over the other. That's why I just am saying as a broad category social deduction games. But they're a lot of fun. And my anecdote for that is for my bachelor party. As you can imagine, it was just board gaming. 48 hours of board gaming. My wife had nothing to worry about. We were literally board gaming for 48 hours. And my friends just got enthralled with Secret Hitler here because it was easy to learn, and these were guys that had never really played board games at all in their lifetime. So that kind of was telling to me that this is a genre of game that a lot of people can enjoy that maybe typically aren't into board games. So perfect type of game to introduce to a new gamer.
Well, and there's only one person that I've met that has outwardly disliked Secret Hitler, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but they are very closely related to you, Nick. That was outwardly
my sister, we'll just say it.
But for the record, I was not the one that voiced that. So, Cory, what is your number 2 game to introduce to non-gamers or new gamers?
Yeah, so John would appreciate this one. John could not make it here today, but he's here with us in spirit with this pick. My number 2 is Queen Domino. Queen Domino is just fantastic. I'm not much into the name. I don't know what the name really means or has any significance with anything, but
dominoes, and it's a kingdom.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's got some significance then. Yeah. But Queen Domino, a nice light tile placement game that's just super, super easy to teach, but it's got that added layer of depth I'm sure some of you have played King Domino before, which is the lighter version of Queen Domino. I appreciate a little bit more of the moving parts that Queen Domino has, but pretty much you are drafting these tiles, placing them in front of you, and trying to create the best kingdom you can. You are comboing off of different colored tiles. Pretty much the way it works, the scoring is you're scoring your areas in front of you. You're creating this 5x5 grid, so you're locked into a 5x5. If you can't place beyond that, you can't select the tile, so you have to be careful not to box yourself out. But as you're placing the tiles down, let's say you've got an area of 5 green tiles and it's got 2 crowns on 2 of the tiles. You multiply the 2 crowns by the 5 area of green, and that's worth 10 points at the end of the game. What Queen Domino adds over King Domino are the red tiles, and that allows for you to buy some additional endgame scoring and during game scoring tiles that you can build on top of the red tiles you already have on the board. So I like that little added element there. There's a couple other added elements as well, but either King Domino or Queen Domino, just fantastic, has gone over great, both with hardcore gamers and with new gamers alike, and we just have a blast playing it. Another game that takes 5 minutes to teach, and also plays very quickly too. So if you only have like 25, well, maybe it takes a little longer than that, maybe 30 minutes to get a game in, you can throw it down and play it within those 30 minutes and have a great time. And it feels crunchy enough and involved enough to where you feel like you played a meaty game in a short period of time too. So I really appreciate that with any game, and especially with any tile placement game, but my go-to for tile placement would be Queen Domino. Yes.
Not surprisingly, another game that you introduced to us early on as you were trying to get us roped into all the gaming.
Yes. Yep.
So now here we're on our number 1, or the way that I did it, my number 5. And mine is Betrayal at House on the Hill. It is very themey, but I like the horror and the macabre, and this is you are planted into a haunted house. You only know the room that you can see, and you are exploring the room and developing the story as you go. The rooms you visit, the things you do in each room, they dictate how the game unfolds. And there's a certain point where one of your players betrays everybody else, unbeknownst to anybody until that moment. Then there's a separate set of rules for the heroes and the villain. You separate and you figure out how you're gonna win the game. Then it's head to head until one side is completely defeated or everybody's dead. Yep. So I love Betrayal at House on the Hill. Some of these scenarios are a little bit more off the wall than others, but I got my siblings started on a legacy campaign of this, and we were able to get together and really dig into that one, and it's fun. You get to create your characters, and just you're making up your own horror movie as you're playing this really involved game. But if you're not much of a gamer and you still like the horror theme, this will fit right into what you love doing.
Yeah, and I was just going to add too, Betrayal at House on the Hill is one of those games. The part that I appreciate is that you don't feel like you're not the traitor for the entire game. You don't feel like you're trying to keep yourself secret from everybody the whole game. That can add a lot of pressure and a lot of the feeling of like, you know, I hope they don't figure me out, and just a whole lot of tension in your own head for the whole game. And this game definitely doesn't create any of that tension or the pressure. You don't find out if you're betraying everybody until pretty late in the game, and at that point, everybody's so invested in it, it doesn't really matter at that point anyway. You're just kind of given your own little separate goal to go after in the end. But for the majority of the game, you're helping everybody else. So it feels like the majority of the game is a cooperative experience with a little bit of a traitor element twist thrown in at the very end. So I do appreciate that about that too.
Yeah, Nick, what is your number 1 game that you like to introduce to new gamers, and do you have it right next to you?
So I swear this wasn't planned. But ironically, Jurch's 5th is my number 1, and that is Betrayal. Now, I have a copy of Betrayal at Baldur's Gate here in front of me, because that's the one I own, because I think what caught my attention is that some of the scenarios maybe in Baldur's Gate are cooperative. I was like, oh, that sounds fun. But I find this game great for new gamers, partly because it's something that I enjoy as someone that already is well invested in the hobby and want to play with new gamers, but also for a lot of the reasons that Jurch was already talking about. It's a game that's relatively easy to grasp for a new gamer. There's not a lot of tricky rules to understand, and it's quick to get started on. Like, you don't have to set up a huge board because you're making the board as you play the game, so that's really nice. Unlike a lot of games, like at the end of Betrayal, you have a story to tell because you know you have your characters, and you kind of, I think you it's like an RPG-like game. You know, your characters have, you know, their attributes, a little brief storyline to each character. So you kind of embody that character when you're playing the game, like you're the speedy little kid or the that's the one that comes to mind to me. But
Well, there's the scientist.
Yep. Kind of geeky scientist type guy. So you kind of embody that persona while you're playing the game, and then once there's the betrayal, you can that just adds to the story. So
And even if you play the same scenario over and over again, it's different experiences each time.
Yep, that's a good point.
Yep.
So a lot of variety in this game
Yeah.
too, because of however many scenarios come with the original.
Like 50.
Yeah, 50.
Yep.
So a lot of opportunity, a lot of replayability value as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that's why it's my number one.
Excellent. All right, Cory, take us home.
All right, my number one, social deduction, going right back to what we've kind of already talked about, so kind of a boring ending to this, but a game that I have to mention in almost every list we do is the Resistance, or the Resistance Avalon. I'm kind of geared more towards the Resistance Avalon nowadays, more so than the original, because it adds just a little extra twist to a few things, but either one is just fantastic. Social deduction creates a lot of tension, a lot of family feuds, a lot of yelling. It creates people to hate each other by the end of it, and what's better than that? But the Resistance, it's basically just social deduction at its finest. You're given a secret role at the beginning of the game. Nobody else knows if you're on the good side or the bad side. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, not nobody, but...
If you're good, you know.
If you're good, you know, yes. But you are basically trying to suss out who is on your team the whole time. Or, all the bad people or all the spies know who each other are. Secretively, but the rest of everybody else doesn't know who's good or bad. And you're trying to figure that out in a very, very short time span. 5 little missions that you send people out on, and if you pick the wrong people to go on the mission, all it takes is one fail card to turn over from those people to fail the entire mission. So I guess I should kind of go back a little bit on how that works, but you are given either a pass or a fail card. If you're selected to go on that mission, you're secretively putting one of those cards face down on the table. They all get shuffled up. And if you're on the spy team or the bad team, you are more often than not throwing a fail card in there. So, hopefully it's the only fail card. If you and another spy go on the same mission and you throw 2 fail cards down and only 3 people went on the mission, that's really going to tip people off to know kind of who is on the bad side. But that's kind of a part of the fun of this game too. You are kind of giving little, nods or eye signals to your partners and trying to, tip each other off on what you're going to. No. Yeah.
Don't throw it.
Exactly. Don't mess it up. But it's one of those games where it's literally just one card, you know your role, and you're just trying to call out people and call it out as you see it, and kind of lie and be, deceiving in that way. But every single time it's different. Every single time it creates an uproar, creates for a loud environment, a lot of fun. And it's definitely on the more of the party-esque style of game, but one that never fails. I mean, whether or not you win or lose, I have a blast every single time. So yeah, either the Resistance or the Resistance Avalon. I guess I should say the Avalon version throws in a little bit of a twist where there's a Merlin and an assassin, and Merlin knows who all the bad people are. But if the assassin in the group can pick out who Merlin is by the end of the game, if Merlin's, tipping off who the bad people are to the good people the whole time, and they catch that, the assassin can then stab Merlin, and the bad team wins that way as well. So throws in a little bit of a twist, but yeah, either version is just fantastic. So social deduction, the Resistance Avalon.
Well, that's excellent. So we gave you roughly like 12 or 13 or 14 games that we love introducing to new players. There's a little bit of overlap. There's definitely variations to these games. We thank you all for showing out. We love putting on this content. We love this convention, and thank you, Con of the North, for letting us have this room and put on a bunch of games. So we're gonna get back to actually playing and hosting more games.
All right.